So these two island groups, Mauritius and the Chagos Archipelago, they had been controlled by France, but the Napoleonic Wars delivered them into the hands of the British. And the British administered both of these areas as part of the British Empire. And because the Chagos Islands was largely very difficult to populate and there was nothing really there much at all, they simply administered the Chagos Islands from their colony of Mauritius and continued to administer the Chagos Islands from Mauritius until the 1960s, when post-World War II, what you were facing was the decolonization movement throughout the world. And the Mauritians began kicking off and wanting independence. And the British could see the writing on the wall, and they knew that sooner or later the British would have to get out of Mauritius. So what we did quite cleverly was we thought, well, what about the Chagos Islands? They're also ours, as it were. So we're going to set the Chagos Islands free of Mauritius, and we're going to set the Chagos Islands up as a separate entity in and of itself, a separate British sovereign colony that we'll control. So they did that in 1965. The Chagos Islands got administrative independence from Mauritius and were just set up as a British colony in and of itself, called the British Indian Ocean Territory. And then what happened in Mauritius in 3 years later was a democratic election was held and the Mauritius Independence Party won. And so in 1968, the British left Mauritius, and Mauritius became an independent part of the Crown Commonwealth, with the Queen as head of state, and she stayed head of state, as it happened, until 1992, when it became a republic. But by 1968, the people in Mauritius were like, well, there you go. Where's the Chagos Islands? Oh, they're still over there, 1,300 miles away. But guess what? We don't have any control over them anymore, because 3 years ago, the British made them basically a sovereign separate colony. And that's always grated on the Mauritians. And they've always said, well, it was administered, the Chagos was administered by the British when they were in Mauritius. Now that the British have left, surely we should be able to administer the Chagos Islands. Well, sorry, you can't, because before you got your so-called independence, we made the Chagos Islands separate from Mauritius. So that was at least some clever thinking, unbelievably clever thinking of the British diplomats at the time. Unusually clever thinking, actually, to foresee that. Because if you know one thing about British post-war diplomats, they're all just bloody idiots, excuse me. But for that one, they actually figured something out there, which was really quite remarkable when you think of it. So ever since then, ever since 1968, the Mauritians have been, those should come to us. And they've got a kind of argument. But we've also got an argument as well. And so it's really just two different points of view as far as that's concerned. My own view, of course, is that they absolutely do belong to Britain, and they've only ever existed in any real sense under British rule in one way or another.